Apex Online Racing is sponsored by Elgato, who created this lovely Stream Deck. For more information about the Stream Deck, the link is in the description below.
Good evening everybody and welcome back to AOR PS4 F1 Season 16 for the Singapore Grand Prix, the 15th round of what has been an enthralling season thus far. I'm Ali Kid and joining me in the commentary box once again this evening is Gaming Ali Monda.
Thanks for the welcome, Ali. Well, Singapore, it's a very mentally challenging track and you know it's a real different to Monza last week, so I'm really looking forward to this one.
Yeah, it couldn't really be much more different from Monza last week, but coming into this one, the championship is finally poised, as it has been all season long, with Michael leading Diesel Killer by 18 points following his victory at Monza last time out. Singapore, though, is renowned for being one of the toughest tracks on the calendar and has thrown up some crazy, unexpected results in the past, and at this late stage of the season, any drama could have huge ramifications for the championship.
Yes, it was a significant moment in the championship last week. Michael winning his 4th race of the season. It was actually the first time he'd won a race outright without relying on having no penalties. So it just shows, you know, not only is he consistent, but he can get the job done at the very front of the grid, even without relying on other people's mistakes.
That has been the case all season. He's been incredibly consistent, only one or two blips here or there, and as a result of that, he is out in front in the championship, and he's probably going to be looking to stay there between now and the end of this season. He's been almost faultless thus far, and it'll be interesting to see whether he can keep that going between now and the end of this season. But as we've already mentioned, Singapore, though, is one of the most demanding tracks anywhere on the calendar, both in real life and on the game, although in the game the drivers don't have to deal with the extreme heat. Doing tackling 23 corners on every single lap is incredibly demanding, and there are so many opportunities to crash as well. The walls are never far away at all. You can see our current pole time and total race time records, they are both going to get blown out of the water today. You can rest assured of that one. A 1:35.8 pole time, that is certainly getting beaten. We're expecting pole time to be around the high 1:32s if it's a dry session. And Singapore, you can never discount the chance of rain either, but as we take a look at this track then, you can see all 23 corners, 2 DRS zones, which are the main overtaking opportunities into turns 1 and 7, although they're not really that great overtaking opportunities. It's very hard to overtake around this track, but now let's ride on board with Tino Nakarinen around this Singapore circuit.
What is up, guys? My name is Ben, otherwise known as Teammate Marduk, and today you join me for an AOR Hype Energy F1 League hot lap around the Singapore Grand Prix. Today we're on board with Tino Nakarinen in the Williams F1 car, heading into turn 1, braking at the 100-meter board, turning in very early there to maximise just the track width around the Singapore Grand Prix. Very tight for space. You want to maximise as much of that as possible. Heading into turn number 5 there, as you see the curbing on the left, that's when you want to brake. Nice flowing exit now onto this very short back straight where opportunities to overtake are very limited. Braking now for the 150-meter board. Turn in, 4th gear, actually 3rd he takes it to get the nose in. Now braking for this 90-degree set of corners. 2nd gear, short shifting up to 3rd, then 4th, down shifting to 3rd. Using up all the track width to maximise that exit. Now heading to the old Singapore sling, which was sadly removed a few years ago. Much more flowing now. Swing the car in left before you swing right. Important to hit the curbing there right, otherwise the car can get spat out towards the wall, and that's not what you want. Through to the hairpin now. Nice rotation through there. Short shifting up through the gears now onto this back straight. Nice overtaking area in the race as we brake at the 100-meter board. Late apex on the power nice and early. Don't extend too much to the left or that will be a disallowed lap. Braking now into the 3rd sector. Very technical part of the lap and where you can win or lose a lot of time. Now braking now for this stadium grandstand section. Again, really testing on the mechanical grip. All 2nd and 3rd gear corners through here. Nice exit. Try and kiss that curbing and also kiss the wall on the right hand side. Through to the final corner. And that is a lap of the Singapore Grand Prix. A very fast one indeed. Tino, you've absolutely
So let's get into qualifying then. We have 13.5 minutes remaining of this session, and currently your provisional poleman is your championship leader, Jim Michael. And actually, before we get into this one, there have actually been quite a few changes with regards to people's names, so it is a little bit difficult to follow. So you can see Jim Michael, he's changed his name from VGIA Michael, he's joined the Jim Esports team, hence why he's changed his name. VSR Flying Finn was formerly just Flying Finn, so that was reasonably easy enough to follow. MTN Leclerc, I believe, has been promoted up from F2, so he's a new driver in the league. Williams Jim Roy, I believe, was Deagle Killer, and Williams Jim Tim was Tim Palm. And TRL Snitchel, this is the most strange one of all of them, was NTG Freak, who was driving for Mercedes but is now a reserve driver. And Epic Gamer, the man who's currently third in the championship, is now VGIA Lucas in the Haas. So yeah, it's a little bit difficult to follow. Some of them are fairly self-explanatory, others aren't, but yeah, good luck following that throughout this race.
Yes, lots of changes. Well, you know, Freak, when he was on the Mercedes, had some really good performances early on the season, but just got caught up in too many incidents as the season went on. So he decided to step aside for someone who wanted to have that full-time seat. So shame, really, because he did perform really well, but I'm sure as a reserve, he'll give us some good performances.
Yeah, and I think as a reserve as well, you just have all the pressure taken off you. Like, he was, for quite a large portion of the season, sat in P2 in the championship and looked like he was going to be the man bringing the title fight to Michael, but it didn't quite work out for him. So I imagine with him being a reserve and his points not counting towards the championship, he can just do whatever he wants, really, and just go for extreme strategies, take a few risks, and just have a bit of fun, which is probably going to be quite entertaining to watch, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, he's got good speed, so he's certainly going to be one that I'm going to keep an eye on, that is for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you never know how Freak is going to perform, really. He was always incredibly inconsistent while he was driving for Mercedes. A bit like his Mercedes teammate, Ollie D. He's currently sat in P4, and you do have to wonder now whether it's now becoming a bit of a stretch for Ollie and Williams Alex to still fight for this championship. They're now a fair old way behind, so they definitely need the current top three to have a few issues between now and the end of the season if they want to be in the fight by the end.
Yeah, the trouble is neither one of them have won a race this season, and you know that's the kind of big results they're going to need, because after this race we only have 6 rounds to go. So if they're not, you know, winning races on a regular basis, they're not really going to have much of a title challenge, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and they definitely need to be banging in consistent good results if they want to be anywhere near the top come the end of the season. But they've both been fairly good, fairly consistent, both showing their experience on a number of occasions, but we haven't quite seen that outright blistering pace that won both of them their respective titles back in season 14 and 15. If you remember, back towards the end of season 14, Ollie was just banging in pole times and destroying everybody in the field, and the same with Synthetic throughout season 15 as well, but that hasn't quite been the case this season. They don't seem to quite have the pace of the kind of new generation of drivers that's come through, but they've definitely on occasion shown their experience, shown their skill, and got results in other ways rather than just being the outright fastest.
Yes, I mean, there's certainly been, you know, not just in AOR, but in general, sort of a lot of younger drivers coming through, and they seem to get younger and younger. I mean, before long, we'll probably have a 10-year-old winning AOR Tier 1. It's, you know, it's getting to that stage, to be honest with you.
Yeah, Flying Finn, we know, is very young. I believe he's 15 and he was 14 at the start of the season, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the case. Which is quite a young age to be competing at such a high level, really. It's quite a high-pressure environment when you're competing against not necessarily adults, but older people who are older than you. It takes quite a lot of maturity to be able to race at such a high level and keep you cool when things go wrong, which tends to be the problem. It was certainly the problem I experienced when I was racing at that age. It was a little bit difficult sometimes to keep things under control, and I imagine some of these guys will definitely have experienced that at various points in their careers in inverted commas.
I think everyone has, whatever level you race at in these games, whether it's, you know, at a top tier like this or, you know, well down in some sort of local league. It doesn't matter. The pressure is the same relative to your pace level, and handling that is one of the key skills for being a good racer.
Yeah, it certainly is. Being able to keep in control of your emotions is something that even real-life drivers struggle with. But let's ride on board then with Jim Michael, the man who's currently on provisional pole position as he goes into turn 1, using up all of the track and some on the right-hand side. That is a very, very wide entry, using up as much of the track as is available to him, and then short shifting up into third gear from first, almost reminiscent of F1 2016, that, going through the gears very, very quickly, trying to minimise the wheel spin, then getting on the DRS for the second time in the lap, coming into turn 7. This corner's quite awkward, actually. It feels quite different to how it did on previous games, getting very close to the wall on the right-hand side, and so far this is looking pretty decent, a little bit wide all over the curb on the exit, but I think this next section of corners is probably one of the hardest on the track, really.
Yes, I mean you got the run up towards the Anderson Bridge, but you know the Singapore slingshot, it's not there anymore. That infamous chicane we used to have here. But this is still a very tricky sequence corner. It's very easy to understeer into the wall on the left side. Oh, Michael nearly did that there, and then going into this hairpin here. So you know, sector 2 I feel is the key sector of the track for me.
And that corner that Michael's just gone through as well feels incredibly awkward with these enormous cars and with high ballast that everybody's running here. He's in the wall slightly. That was a bit of an odd one. But yeah, when you go through such tight corners as that with such high ballast with these enormous cars, it just feels incredibly awkward. These cars really are not designed for that kind of thing. They're designed for being thrashed through high-speed corners where the downforce can really work. But at such low speed like that, it is just not a pleasant experience at all. And so is this final chicane, I say, as well, because it's just quite an awkward low-speed corner. And then through the final 2 corners, turns 22 and 23. That's a fairly decent lap from Michael, and it puts him P2 provisionally, about half a tenth off VGI Lucas, which is not a bad banker lap going into the remaining few minutes of this qualifying session.
It is very tight, just over a tenth of a second covering the top 3.
Which is incredibly close, as we've seen throughout this entire season, really. Let's have a look actually what tyres everybody is running, as Flores bangs in a 32.8 and puts himself on provisional pole position. We were expecting the pole time to be around high 32s, and we're already well into that already with a 32.8. Another strong lap from the McLaren, who unfortunately for him hasn't been able to convert his qualifying results into race results, and is down in P9 in the championship, I believe, despite having many pole positions. I think it's upwards of 5, maybe even 6 pole positions so far this season, so his qualifying pace is unreal. But as we've mentioned many times, his race pace and consistency isn't quite where it should be.
Yeah, it's very much a glass half empty driver in this league this season. He's had so many pole positions. I mean, he's had 5 this season, which is equal, and he could, be the most at the end of this session, but just hasn't been able to get the job done in the races. He's not had a single victory to his name this season, and one of the key things that's been his real weakness is penalties. He says this is a track which you can get a lot of time penalties, especially in sector 2 where there's so many fast, left and right handers, potential to cut corners there, and that's just been his weakness. And if you get 6 or 9 seconds of penalties a race, you're not going to be anywhere at this level.
And that is certainly what we've seen so far this season, is that even the smallest amount of corner cutting penalties is enough to put you well down the order. If you want to be finishing at the front in these races, you cannot afford to be throwing away time by cutting corners and not gaining anything. You just can't do it, particularly when you're getting between 9 and 12 seconds of corner cutting penalties. You can't be expecting to finish anywhere near the front with penalties like that.
Yes, I mean, Michael, he's won 3 of his 4 races this season because he had no penalties, or he had less time penalties than the drivers who were ahead of him on track, at Australia, Germany and Canada. And that could be the difference between him winning the championship and not winning it. That's how important it is.
And I think that's certainly a skill that comes with experience as well, knowing when to push and developing that consistency that you don't keep cutting corners, because you really don't gain much time from doing it at all. So, yeah, it definitely is something that develops over time, and you start to build up a consistency, and it tends to be the more you practice, the more you get into a rhythm, the better you are at avoiding penalties, and I think that kind of goes without saying. So if you're slightly down on practice, or you haven't quite developed that consistency that you need, it's much easier to pick up penalties than it would otherwise be.
And of course, next week we go to a track which isn't at all known for corner cut penalties, and that's Russia, so it's not going to get any easier for them.
Yeah, well, the game is slightly more lenient there, so some people might find it a little bit easier to avoid corner cutting penalties there. Singapore as well is actually quite difficult for corner cutting. I remember back to season 14, I managed to throw away my only qualifying lap in this session by corner cutting the penultimate corner and just taking way too much curb on the inside, and there's a couple of opportunities you have to do that here. This corner that we're watching Jarno go through here, turn 7, turns 1, 2, 3, pretty much any corner on the track where there isn't a wall there, you can find yourself cutting corners and losing time and picking up penalties, which is certainly going to affect the result, as Jarno's a little bit in the wall there.
Yeah, luckily no damage, but that would have lost him a tenth at least. So he goes through the final section corner, turn 22, quite an understeering. Whoa! Yeah, running a bit too much ballast there, or getting on the throttle a bit too much. That's only P10, a very scruffy lap, but that was on the ultra softs though, and he's the fastest ultra soft runner at the moment.
I love that line. Oh my goodness, what is Jarno doing? The man is desperate to get back to the pit lane. That's also something that's a bit of a problem with this track. You desperately need all of the available time in qualifying, because it's such a long lap time-wise. You have to get back to the pits incredibly quickly, and Jarno is clearly taking matters into his own hands and is desperately trying to get back to the pits as quickly as possible. Clearly not happy with that lap at all. I think we'll do Yana the benefit of the doubt. Go and watch somebody else, so your eyes don't have to be pained by whatever is going on your screens just there. That is quite a sight to see.
Yeah, we don't need to see the Aravra career mode lines there.
Yeah, I think we'll let him off on that occasion, because he is in a bit of a rush to get back to the pit. So let's ride on board instead with Jim Michael, who's on the hyper soft tyres, as is everybody else in the top 10 apart from Jarno. So he's the only man to go out on the Ultras, which is pretty interesting to see. The hypers are a useless tyre, really. They really are pretty terrible. There's not much you can do on them at all. They are so sensitive to the temperature. They overheat if you push even slightly too much, and then it's just impossible to get the temperature back down again. So it will be interesting to see how that strategy plays out in the race and who's actually going to be capable of managing their tyres.
Yes, I mean, tyre management's always been a factor of this track, because, you know, one stop, even on F1 2016, one stop was the best strategy to go on. So it'll be the same case here again. But, you know, if you're on the pad of this track, I mean, it's a real nightmare. The game is just not set up for the tyre temps here for the pad. You know, even if you're not pushing at all, they seem to just blow up.
Yeah, poor old Curly, still the only pad user in this league, as Michael takes a lot of curb on the outside there. I would be surprised if that is not an invalidation. I mean, he's carrying on, still looking pretty aggressive, so I imagine he has avoided getting invalidation there. He's pushing very, very hard, getting incredibly close to the wall on the exit of turn 5 for activating the DRS and down Raffles Boulevard into turn 7, picking out a braking point just before the 100 metre wall, pretty much as you pass that corner, avoiding the curb on the inside, straddling the curb on the outside. That's not going to help his lap time at all. Second gear through that next 90-degree right, and then you have another 90-degree left, just zigzagging from side to side across the track, trying to open up the next corner as much as possible. And that looked pretty nice from Michael, missing the apex marginally, but I don't think we'll have lost too much time there. And then through one of the worst sequences of corners anywhere in F1, it's just so incredibly difficult to get it right. I think it's probably got to be up there with the most challenging parts of any circuit anywhere in the world, and Michael has mastered that beautifully. That looks pretty much on edge. You couldn't really get much more out of that, and this lap so far is looking pretty good from the McLaren.
It is. Just checking his sector times at the moment. He was slow in Sector 1, but significantly faster in Sector 2, nearly 4 tenths per second faster in Sector 2. So if he carries on with that correlation, this will be a provisional pole time.
This is one hell of a lap from our current championship leader. He's in the lead of this championship by 18 points. He is fighting for the title well and truly here as we move into the final few rounds of this season, getting incredibly close to that wall on the outside and throwing it into the final two corners. What is it going to be for Michael as he comes up to the line? It's a 32.7, which is good enough at the moment for provisional pole position. Let's go on board though with one of his championship rivals, VGI Lucas, formerly known as Epic Gamer. He's currently in P3, did have provisional pole at one point in the session, and will certainly be looking to regain that mantle as he's in the wall slightly on the exit, and that is not going to help him one bit here.
No, not at all. Well, Jim Roy, who used to be Deagle Killer, he's actually heading towards the end of his lap, or maybe he's on an out lap actually, not quite sure.
This lap from Lucas has been all over the place. The car does not look stable at all. Something to note is that Lucas does use cockpit cam, I believe, for these races, which around this track is certainly going to make a bit of a difference. The visibility is pretty much non-existent. It's been a very, very scruffy lap though. A lot of sliding all over the place really. I'd be very surprised to see him improve as he's in the wall again. That's several times on this lap and several big drifts as well. This has not come together anywhere near as well as Michael's lap has. So through the final sector, then through the final chicane, the car just looks so unstable the whole way through. Kissing the wall as well on the exit, and then through the final two corners. Let's see what it is for VGI and Lucas as he crosses the line. The checker flag is out and he does not improve. So he stays third, Flores stays second, VSR Flying Finn currently down in P4 ahead of Veloce Oli D in P5, who has retired from the session. I think the last man to have a say in who gets pole is going to be Flying Finn here.
Flying Finn, yes, but also keep an eye out for Jim Roy as well. He's going round on his flying run. So Flying Finn will finish his lap first, I believe.
So let's go back to Flying Finn then and see what he can do before we head back towards Jim Roy as he comes to the end of his lap as well. This has looked pretty good from Flying Finn so far, using up all the track and some, again, slightly in the wall. Everybody is pushing the limits to the absolute max here as he's kissing the wall again. And then through the final two corners, can he challenge our championship contenders for pole position? He won his first race at Spa 2 races ago, and no, not quite. It's very close, but not quite as fast as he needed to be. Let's go back to the Red Bull driver though. Currently sat P2 in this championship, 18 points off the lead. And through the final chicane, is he going to be able to nail this lap and put something together to challenge those guys at the front? At the moment, I don't think so. He's running very low on ERS. He's run out before he's crossed the line. It's a little bit of a scrappy end to the lap, and it's not an improvement. So it will be P14 for for the man currently sat in P2 in the championship. He's got an uphill struggle coming into this one.
Yeah, so he was trying to get into near to the top 6 on the Ultra Source, but that gamble didn't work out because the lap just wasn't good enough. So he's going to be P14. Track position is so important on this track, so he's going to have to do quite a lot of overtaking. But he will have fresh choice of tyres, so and he won't have to use the Hypersofts at start. So it's not over for him just yet.
No, and we have seen both of those Red Bulls actually, who are down starting in P15 and 16, come from that far back on a number of occasions. Admittedly, they're on tracks that are a little bit easier to overtake and work your way forwards than here at Singapore, but I wouldn't be surprised if they pull something out of the bag here. They've done it so many times so far this season. I wouldn't be surprised if they managed to get well into the points by the end of this one.
Yeah, exactly. But it's really good for the Constructors' Championship for McLaren. They're trailing Red Bull at the moment by just over 20 points, but they're both 1 and 2, and both Red Bulls out of the points. Now, Ali, question for you after you go through the qualifying results. So just go through those first.
So there you go then. Confirmation of your qualifying results as VGI Lucas has a 5-place grid penalty. Not sure what that's for or what he's done to deserve that, but that's certainly going to hurt his starting position and standing in the race here. But it's Jim Michael on pole from Floris Weegers in P2, so McLaren 1-2 with Lucas down in P3 but with a 5-place grid penalty ahead of Flying Finn in 4th, Ollie D in 5th, Williams, Alex, Clarkey, Leclerc, Jaythorne and Aresi rounding out the top 10 with Big C the first man with free tyre choice ahead of Nardi, Curly, Yarno, Williams, Roy, Williams, Jim, Tim and Car Alex with TR Snitchell, Artsy Alonso and Overdie Kink rounding out the grid. That was quite a qualifying session.
Yes, it was. Well, apparently Lucas had a collision with Big C. We don't know if that may have been lag or something like that.
Oh dear. Well, that hasn't quite gone to plan, has it? Because we saw Big C leave the session earlier on, so I wonder if that had anything to do with it.
Yes, perhaps maybe it was maybe when Big C left the session, maybe it was like AI controlled, like ghosting wasn't working for some reason because they go really slowly. So maybe Epic accidentally hits an AI car like that.
Yeah, it could honestly have been anything. We won't know until after race and we see footage from Epic Gamer or whatever, but regardless of how it happened, it hasn't worked out very well for him at all. He would have been starting up in P3 and now he'll have to start from down in P8, I believe, which is not going to help him one bit in his challenge for the championship. He's already lost a fair few points to his championship contenders. He's down in P3 at the moment, P3 in the standings at the moment, behind Deagle Killer and Michael, and he certainly needs to be making inroads very early on to try and challenge them.
Absolutely, and it's strange because in the real 2017 and 2018 Formula 1 season, Singapore was a turning point in those campaigns, and it could well be here because, you know, Michael is in pole position and his 2 closest rivals are nowhere near him on the grid at the moment. And what I was going to ask you, Ali, is given Floris's inability to get victories this season, do you think Floris is going to have to start, you know, playing the rear gunner to aid Michael's championship bid?
It certainly depends how close a relationship they have as teammates. We've seen in the past that sometimes teammates in league racing work incredibly closely together, and other times they just are teammates because they happen to pick the same car in the car allocation. So if they do know each other and they talk a lot between races, then that certainly could be the case. And Floris might have to accept at some points that if he wants to get the best result for his team and help his teammate win the title, he may have to sit back and be a bit less aggressive and try and cause as few problems for his teammate as possible. So that's quite an interesting dynamic coming into this one, and we'll see whether the 2 McLarens starting on the front row managed to take the first corner a little bit better than the 2 Ferraris did back in 2017. But we've just had VGI Lucas in the chat saying that he received a penalty for something that wasn't his fault. As of yet, we don't know what that was, and he had DRS broken for his final run in Q3, so an absolute nightmare of a qualifying session for him.
Yeah, well, those DRS failures, they're always frustrating when they happen, and they tend to happen in qualifying when you need it the most.
Yeah, it's quite an awkward thing to have in the game as well, because there's nothing he can do to control that whatsoever. But I'm sure VSL Flying Finn and Veloce Olid will be absolutely loving that penalty and getting themselves a free position on the starting grid. So VSL Flying Finn, having picked up his first ever victory at Spa 2 races ago, now starting up in P3, he's got a big chance to do something again here today and get really amongst the championship contenders. Yeah,
exactly. Also, Singapore, as you mentioned at the start of the broadcast, rain is quite common here, but you know, it's a completely pitch black sky this night race, so we have no idea. We can't really look at the weather as you normally can on most tracks with the clouds and stuff, so it will come any time.
Something else to note then as well before the start of this one is pretty much everybody outside the top 10 has gone for these soft compound tyres. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a few moving roadblocks in the second stint of this race when the leaders pit from their hypersofts, which they're definitely going to do pretty early on, and then come up behind soft runners who are yet to pit on a tyre that really doesn't offer much performance whatsoever around this track. But we have 20 cars then lining up into their grid slots for the Singapore Grand Prix, and what a race we have ahead of you today. What happens in this race tonight could be the defining moment for who wins this championship here in Season 16 in AOR PS4 F1. But here we go then, we are ready to go racing for 31 laps around the Singapore Grand Prix circuit. We have 5 red lights. And away we go, the two McLarens on the front row. Who is going to get the better start? Seems like it's a fairly decent getaway from Michael. Is he going to stay to the racing line into turn 1? Yes, he is. Flores has to sit behind, and Flying Finn can't challenge him either, as Veloce Oli D as well defends from Alex and remains in P4 as Clarkey works his way up into P6. But it's still line astern as you were off the start for the front runners, and Michael has a reasonable gap to Flores, and it could actually be Flying Finn who's the one on the move as we come out of turn 5 and down Raffles Boulevard for the first time. Let's see if Flying Finn is anywhere near close enough to challenge either of those two McLarens. No, he is not, and he will have to sit behind. I believe that is Aresi and Curly perhaps going side by side towards the rear of the grid, as Lucas has lost a position as well, so he's down in P9 now rather than P8, but it's been a pretty clean start from everybody so far.
Yeah, very clean start so far. You know, there was a bit of wheel banging in the lower orders of the top 20, but you know, nothing too serious. Oh, Flores goes mega deep in sector 2, and now he's going to be under enormous pressure from Flying Finn straight away, and that's good news for Michael actually, because he's going to be getting a nice gap at the front already out of DRS range of his teammate.
It's all playing very nicely into the hands of Jim Michael, showing just how important qualifying is, and he's already getting away from the rest of the field. We've seen in real life, I believe the pole sitters won every single time here, apart from when they've DNF'd, so things looking fairly good for Michael so far in this race, and yeah, that's already a pretty sizable gap to have at this point, and Flores starting to form a little bit of a train with everybody incredibly close behind him. But as we come to the end of the first lap of 31 at this Singapore Grand Prix, it is still a McLaren 1-2 with VSR Flying Finn just behind them and Veloce Oli D in P4 just behind them as well. Let's go and find VGI Lucas, who has not had the greatest start to this race and now is down at P9 after that 5-place grid penalty in qualifying.
Yes, well, you missed it, but Jay Thorne did an enormous dive bomb at turn 14 on Matt Leclerc, and he nearly hit the side of Clarkey as well, so he had to back off and give the place back to Leclerc, because that wouldn't have been a fair overtake there, so he's still in P8.
I think it's fair to say that Jay Thorne has not had the best season so far, certainly not the same as the kind of lofty standards that he set himself on the old games, and it just hasn't quite worked out. It's a little bit painful to see him struggling so much, really, so I hope fortunes improve for him quicker, because otherwise he's not going to be picking up any points anytime soon, really. He's currently, at the moment though, running in the points in P8, so things looking up slightly for the Sauber driver, who've, well, the Sauber team in general have had a bit of a torrid time this season.
Yep. So there are a few big names in this league who haven't really lived up to it, but it's because the performances of some of the new guys have been so good, and 1.2 second advantage between the two McLarens now. These hypers don't look very good already, so those on the ultra softs, particularly Curly Whirly, may be gaining some places in the next lap or so.
Yeah, he may well indeed be. I think he was one of the first guys to have free tyre choice. I know it was Big C that started in P11, but he's lost a couple of positions, having started on those soft compound tyres. They do take a long time to heat up those softs, and they really don't offer a lot of performance either. So they're not the greatest tyre, but they're certainly better than these hyper softs are. They just destroy themselves after about 2 or 3 laps of running, and once the temperature goes up a little bit too high on the rear tyres, it's just impossible to get it back down again. You just can't control the tyre wear at all. I think rather than the wear, it's the temperature that's more of a problem to worry about here.
Yes, and well, we just got a perfect example of that. Flores going really wide at the final corner, and Flying Finn's now right on his tail, so I think we could see an overtake here, or at least an attempt by Flying Finn in the next few corners down Raffles Boulevard.
DRS has just been enabled, although their gap's opened up to half a second, which is probably slightly too far back for Flying Finn to think about going for a move. He will have DRS twice around this lap, though, down Raffles Boulevard and down into turn 1 as well, which should be a reasonable performance gain, although he's only gained, what, half a tenth, maybe a tenth max there, which hasn't really helped him out that much at all. But Flores might be a little bit vulnerable, seeing as he won't have DRS from his teammate, which should, in theory, make Flying Finn's job that little bit easier.
Yes, but he's on the hypersoft as well, so he's going to have the same struggles as everyone else in the top 10. It's going to have very shortly. But everyone's DRS is counting each other out. In fact, there isn't a single gap over a second in the entire grid. I mean, except for the top 2, of course. But even that's under a second now.
Yeah, it's just nose to tail throughout the entire field. And I imagine, well, the guys behind haven't lost any time at all. So I would imagine that if the ultra soft runners and the soft runners can push when they're in the clear air, they certainly have a chance later on in this race. If they push hard in the second stint and can actually find a way through to overtake people, that's where the problem starts to come in. Even though you might have much better pace, trying to overtake the other cars despite a pace advantage can be quite a challenge. But I think now Michael's starting to struggle with his tyres, because that gap between him and Flores has deteriorated massively. I wouldn't be surprised to see Michael coming in now.
Yes, well, the trouble is, if he loses a place and then the tyres just go off, you can easily lose a few more places. So you may have to think about it. Here comes Flores, though, getting a bit closer, but maybe if that hadn't have been his teammate, that's probably why he didn't go for the move straight away. And pit stops already.
From Jaythorn and VGI Lucas, as Jaythorn picked up a 5-second time penalty for, I believe that was probably speeding into the pit lane. And yeah, Lucas going for a little bit of an alternative strategy. He didn't have the best qualifying at all after that penalty. He's got to try and do something different to work his way back up the order, as now Ollie D, I think, might be having a look at Flying Finn into turn 7. Flying Finn does not have DRS from the car in front. Ollie D in that Mercedes diving down the inside, and he gets his way through. A very nice move indeed. And now Williams, Alex as well, is going to be looking to follow him through on that Toro Rosso, but Flying Finn defends reasonably nicely in the end. It manages to limit the damage to only one position. So Ollie D with a very nice move up into P3.
Yes, very nice move there. And Curly Whirly doing a similar job down the Raffles Boulevard DRS straight up to P8 now, as Aresi struggles on his hypersofts. And you know, Curly Whirly wouldn't surprise me if he picks up a couple of more places even before this lap's gone. He's already on the back of Clarky, who's really struggling on rear tyre grip.
As is pretty much everybody in the entire field, as that camera shot just showed everybody drifting out of the hairpin. That was such an incredible camera shot to see every car almost sideways there as Curly moves up into P7 there. He really is working his way up the order very, very swiftly. A very impressive drive from the Ferrari, who I believe someone informed me in the chat that he's actually on the wheel now, not on the pad, so we may have lost our sole pad user in this league, as Flores putting his teammate under all kinds of pressure here. And let's see which McLaren bites first and comes into the pits then. Is Michael going to pit on this lap? Lap 4 of 31. No, he does not. Is Flores going to pit? Yes, he is. He looked like he was deliberating for quite a while there about whether he came into the pits or not. And Veloce Oli D as well comes into the pits, and Flying Finn. So they've all pitted, and they're all going for the undercut here.
Yes, they are. The advantage is, you know, because the field was so close, traffic will not be a problem. But, you know, undercut shouldn't be a problem for any of the guys. But the likes of Lucas, who pitted early, it's going to be interesting where he feeds back out, so I'll keep an eye on him.
And Veloce Oli D, no, he hasn't jumped Flores. Flores' car was sat in his pit box there on my screen for a second, and then he just appeared back in front of the Mercedes. So it is still Flores ahead of Veloce Oli D, ahead of VSR Flying Finn. Let's see if these guys can gain that time on Michael, though, who seems to be struggling on his Hypersoft tyres quite a lot. But you would imagine the guys on the stone cold soft compound tyres will struggle to get temperature into them particularly quickly at all. So I'm not so sure whether the undercut is going to work. It's definitely going to be touch and go.
Well, you know, these softs will go to the end of the race in terms of the tyre wear, but in terms of the performance, they do start to drop off towards the end of the race. So that's more of the thing. Now, Lucas, it actually works out for him nicely doing that stop a lap before, because he's managed to get past J4, Clarky and Aresi, so he's gained 3 places as a result of his undercut.
As all kinds of crashing has just gone on there. There was one hell of a midfield scrap going into the hairpin, and TRL Schnitzel ended up in the wall, and Williams, Jim Roy and all of that has gained quite a few positions, and both of those Red Bulls somehow managed to survive all of that mess and are now up into P6 and P8 respectively, but they still have a lot of work to do here if they want to get anything from this race, although they really aren't that far behind the leaders at all. If you look how far behind Alex and Michael they are, considering they're going to be on much better tyres at the end of the race, it's really not that big a distance at all. But now, let's see where Michael comes out in relation to Flores. This is going to be potentially the defining moment of this race.
Potentially, yes. Well, Flores has clean air, so as long as he's got his outlap good, he should be able to jump Michael. In theory, he'll have fresher tyres, but this could be very close.
Outright pace has always been Flores' strength. Let's see if he's been able to put this lap together and jump his McLaren teammate, the championship leader. How frustrating would that be for Michael, the man in the lead of the championship, to lose the lead of this race to his teammate over a strategic decision. There is definitely going to be discussion going on at McLaren after this race. Where is Michael going to be? And they're going to be side by side as they go into turn 3, and Flores sneaks ahead of Michael. He has worked the undercut to perfection, and he moves into the net lead of this race, and that could be crucial.
Well, that's great news for Michael's title contenders, but You know, I think there'll be some team radio going on, Fernando Alonso style there from Michael to the McLaren pit wall. That's not what he wanted to see at this stage of the race.
Not at all, and that could cost him dearly, both in terms of this race and potentially in the championship if things don't work out for him later on in this season or later on even in this race. So let's see how this dynamic works out between the two of them. Let's see first of all who has the most pace, because if Flores just disappears off down the road, he should probably be under no obligation to let his teammate through. But when they start coming up to traffic, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how things work out. But that has definitely made this race a hell of a lot more interesting, as now pretty much everybody who started on, well, not everybody who started on the Hypersoft tyres has come into the pits by now. So now we have to wait, what, 20 odd laps or so to wait and see till when the soft runners come into the pits, which is definitely going to be the next interesting stage of this race, to see how they can work their way back through the order on ultra soft, Hypersoft tyres, whatever they decide to go for.
Yes, absolutely. You know, it's going to be all about, you know, who's going to have the better performance. You know, you may not want to push too hard at this stage just so you have a bit of performance at the end. But I think this is a crucial moment for Michael. I think he may have to consider attacking Flores now while he's getting his tyres up to temperature, because they do take a couple of laps to get the softs up to temperature at this particular track. So if he can get past him, then he'll be in good shape.
But getting past people at Singapore tends to be a pretty difficult task at the best of times. That gap currently is half a second. I imagine as Flores' tyres come back up to temperature, he will probably be working his pace back up fairly quickly, as Williams' Jim Roy works his way ahead of Big C, and his charge through the field is beginning again. He's now up into what is P3, and he's just behind Jarno and Curly. Curly looking in very, very good shape in this race. He's had a very good start from outside the top 10, and things are looking pretty good for him at this stage.
Yeah, no, it's looking very good at the moment. But just in terms of the Red Bulls, to me, it looks like they're going to be employing a similar strategy that they employed with such success at Austria, where they did the complete opposite strategy, starting on the hardest compound, finishing on one of the fast compounds. So those two Red Bulls, if they can, you know, not have too big a gap at the end of the race when they switch to the ultra softs, they could still be a threat for the podium.
It does make me wonder how different this championship may look at this stage if Williams Roy hadn't disconnected in Austria. He looked set to win that race. He was ahead of his teammate who won the race in the end, and that disconnection just lost him so much time and took him out of contention for the race victory. But had he won that race, as we predicted that he would have done, the championship certainly would have looked much more different than it does now, and he may well even be leading the championship and be the favourite for the title going into the final few races. And I wonder if he'll look back on that incident ruefully come the end of this season.
Yeah, as well, you know, disconnect. There's nothing more frustrating than something that happens like that. That's not your fault. You know, when you have a racing incident, at least you have someone to blame, be that yourself or the other driver. When the game disconnects, you know, all you can do is just wait for the next race and try and make up for it.
And in fairness to him, he has more than done that with the results he's had following that disconnection so far this season, as everybody now who's in the kind of net battle for this lead is slowly starting to come together. Flores hasn't disappeared away from Michael, who's now actually pretty close to him as we go down Raffles Boulevard. I wonder whether he might well be close enough to go for a move here. Let's see. Into turn 7, no, he's nowhere near close enough actually. As he's going to have to sit behind his teammate again, but that gap is less than 0.3 of a second now, so well, he's definitely putting a huge amount of pressure onto his teammate who's down in P9 in the championship, so it's pretty clear who's the number one driver here, but we'll again be interesting to see how that works out later on in this race. Both of them have pretty much a full bar of ERS to use, so that's not going to be a problem at all going in later on into this one.
Well, Michael knows that Flores has made a lot of mistakes this season during the race, be it penalties or just, you know, in general. And a track like this, it's so easy to get a bit of understeer and slightly hit the wall. So Michael's just got to keep the pressure up. Ollie D actually isn't as quick as either of these two McLarens. He's a couple of tenths a lap slower than these two, which is why Alex and Flying Finn and Lucas are right on his tail.
Well, we saw Ollie D make that move just before the pit window opened, and he managed to work his way ahead of VSR Flying Finn, and Williams Alex as well, and all of that has worked his way ahead of the Toro Rosso, who was in, well, he started in P3 following the penalty for VGI and Lucas. But these two McLarens are still nose to tail pretty much. That gap is, what, 4.5 of a second. I think, though, coming into turn 1, the gap's probably got to be no more than 0.4 of a second if you want to be anywhere near close enough to go for a move into turn 7. There's just no way you can stay close through the final two corners with the dirty air, the high-speed nature of those corners, to go for a move into turn 1. So you've got to stay close and go for a move into turn 7. But making that work is proving to be quite difficult for a number of these drivers. And again, that gap's half a second, which is just way too big to go for a move.
Yes. To be fair, I don't think Michael's looking to make the pass at that particular one anyway. He had his battery down. It's more like this one, but he's actually running negative fuel at the moment, so that's a bit of an issue for Michael.
But he may well have underfueled his car, because at Singapore you really don't need that much, and sometimes it's even faster to run in the lower fuel mixes to save your tyres and to get better traction, rather than use up your fuel to no avail really, and just make things more difficult for yourself in the end. So I imagine that will probably be quite a tactical choice from the McLaren driver, as you are right, they're both driving away from Veloci Oli D, who seems at the moment powerless to do anything about those two McLarens, as whilst all that was going on, VSR Flying Finn managed to pick up a 3-second time penalty, one of the first to fall victim to the corner cutting here. And again, it'll be kind of interesting to see who else manages to pick up corner cutting penalties as well, because at the moment it seems like it's just him in this lead pack.
Yes, and you know, they've just got to try keep it smooth as can, but Oli D just doesn't seem to have pace, and Curly actually pitting from the lead on the Ultratofs. He only managed to last them 9 laps.
Wow, that could definitely be almost a bit of a warning to everybody else in this race that the Ultrasofts are not the best tyre to use at all. And I wonder whether he was struggling particularly with his tyres either. He wasn't really able to drive away from the soft runners in quite the manner that you might have expected. But seeing as he was the lead of that, well, he was in the lead of the race when he pitted, it'll be interesting to see where he comes out in relation to everybody else. Those are the two McLarens going past now, and Curly is going to be ahead of Jaythorn, I believe. Yes, he is just, oh no, he's going to be behind Jaythorn. So that gives you a bit of an indication as to where both of those Red Bulls and Jarno are going to come out later on in this race when they make their final pit stop. So I think that might be too far back to challenge for a race victory here.
Here comes Alex on Oli D.
So can he make the move stick? Yes, he can. And Alex moves ahead of Veloci Oli D, who seems to have been struggling for pace over the last few laps. And, well, there's your proof. And Alex moves ahead of him. Sorry, we were only able to catch the end of that move. But he moves ahead of that Mercedes. The two former championship rivals back in seasons 14 and 15, battling out for what is P10 here, but probably a net P3 come the end of this race, depending on what else happens. But yeah, Oli D's pace not quite where you would expect it at this point.
No, not at all. But there's a long way to go, and we still don't know if we're not going to get some rain or safety car. Two McLarens getting very close once again.
Let's go back on board with Michael. He's so close to the back of his teammate, but it must be so infuriating not being able to do anything about it. The slipstream just isn't strong enough around here. There aren't enough long straights for you to be able to have a look. There's no corner really that lends itself to going for a dive from a long way back, so you have to be so close to the car in front to be able to go for any kind of move, and that's what Michael's experiencing at the moment. So he certainly looks like he's struggling to find any way past his teammate. That gap has been stuck really at about 5 or 6 tenths. It's now up to 7 tenths as Michael struggles again with the dirty air through the final 2 corners. As Flores again, he's taking quite a lot of liberties with the track limits on the exit of that final corner. I wouldn't be surprised if eventually he manages to pick up a 3-second time penalty for that, because we've seen him do that on countless laps now.
Yes, well, Flying Finn actually has a 3-second penalty. He cut the opening section of corners, and now, interestingly, Alex is already starting to break away from Oli D, almost out of DRS, so Oli D may be able to hold off this place. He's just not getting on the power very well. Just before Raffles Boulevard, here comes Flying Finn then.
And Oli D moving just slightly enough to the inside to deter the Flying Finn and that Toro Rosso from going for a move, and he has to sit behind again here. Although Flying Finn certainly looks like he has more pace than that Mercedes at this point, so it's only a matter of time, I believe, before he manages to get through, as VGI Lucas as well waiting in the wings for either of these two to have an incident and see if he can get through at any point as well. Starting down in P8 after that 5th place grid penalty in qualifying, he's doing a pretty good job of getting his race back on track.
Yes, it's a good recovery from Lucas so far, and it just shows definitely our position from that qualifying session, because I think he would have been right up there with the McLarens right now. Now, I think it's a bit of a stalemate between the McLarens at the moment. However, they are closing rapidly to Overdink, or Overdy Kink, however you say it. So that could actually prove to be a factor. You know, if Flores, has a bit of trouble getting past, this might give Michael the opportunity to take the net lead.
With it being Singapore and it being so difficult to overtake, Michael might have to get a little bit inventive and kind of show a little bit of a champion's drive, a little bit of initiative, something out of the ordinary to try and get past his teammate to win this race, as Nardi picks up a 3-second time penalty. He's currently running around in P4 with Big C just behind him, but it's certainly going to be interesting to see how these two start to deal with the traffic. Flores is almost within DRS range of that Renault, and he is now of the last man who has not made a stop in this race. So let's see how quickly Flores can get past this Renault.
I don't think he's going to get it done now, so that's that's going to be bad because he could well be stuck behind that Renault for the rest of the lap. So that's going to put him under all sorts of pressure to get the exit right at the final corner.
And this could create a bit of a concertina effect for all of the leaders. They could end up much closer together than they would have been otherwise, just because it's so hard to overtake you, and you can end up sat behind the car for a couple of sectors, even a lap or two. Really, it's that difficult to overtake, even though you might have a huge pace advantage. We've seen Flores reel in over Kink incredibly quickly, so you would imagine he's going to be able to get past at some point, but even then, you don't rule out anything. I wouldn't be surprised to see over Kink hold up these guys quite a lot.
Yeah, took a nice line for the hairpin, so he was able to get really close. He might even think about a move here, but Kink is going to defend the inside. Flores, perhaps early on in the season, would have gone aggressive, but don't think even he was close enough to attempt to move there. But that still really compromised his speed. Michael is about as close as he has been to his teammate.
Flores just needs to be a little bit careful here not to take any unnecessary risks. He knows he's faster than that Renault, and he will be able to get past as soon as we get to DRS. As Kink is all over the place. He's in the wall, making very strange racing lines through a number of these corners. His soft tyres are not offering him a huge amount of grip at this point. Can Flores do anything to get past though into turn 1? He just doesn't seem as close as he ought to be, actually, so he might have to wait until turn 7. So closing up to the back of that Renault, is he going to go for a move into turn 1? No, he's not. And again, he has to sit behind, so he needs to nail this next section of corners if he wants to have any chance of getting through into turn 7. And Michael as well is going to have a bit of a watching brief here, but if Flores gets past, he needs to try and get past as well, otherwise he is going to lose time hand over fist here, and they are all incredibly close together. Flores needs to do something here to get past this Renault, otherwise his race is quickly going down the drain. Can he get past into turn 7? Is he going to go to the inside? No, he's not, and he's still behind over Kink, and that is allowing Williams, Alex, Veloci, Oli D, VSR Flying Finn as well to get close, as he's going side by side with Veloci, Oli D, and they will be going side by side into the next left as well. VGI and Lucas trying to get involved as well. They're getting very close to the wall, and VSR Flying Finn has managed to make that one stick. What a move from him, although Oli D swoops back around the outside to make that one stick as well, so defending very aggressively and very nicely, it has to be said, and they just about avoid making any more contact with each other, as that battle is getting very, very feisty with all of them incredibly close together. As whilst all of that was going on, Flores manages to get past over Kink as well, and Michael's surely got to try and get through now to avoid letting his teammate get away. Is he going to go for a dive? No, he's not, and he sits behind, and that could well be one of the defining moments of this race if he sat behind over Kink for much longer.
Yes, well, crucial move there, and he's going to get stuck in sector 3. Great racing from Oli D, Flying Finn and Lucas, to not for any of them to get into the wall out of sector 1, so brilliant driving from them. But Flores now already scampering away. He'll be out of DRS range of Kink before they even get to the final corner, I believe. So yeah, Michael's got to get the move done. Look how much Alex has closed in on these two, and it's a poor exit from Michael.
This move has got to be done now. Over Kink has DRS as well. That's not going to help him at all, but Michael is going to look down the inside. No, he's not, so he's going to have to sit behind through turns 1, 2, 3 and 4 and try and make something stick into turn 7. He's surely got to go for it here. There's no way he can afford to sit behind any longer. Over Kink going slightly defensive. That's going to compromise his run. He's just holding up Michael everywhere. Michael, though, will get better drive on the exit in overtake ERS mode and with the DRS as well. Should be able to breeze past. But that has cost him dearly. He's now out of DRS range of Flores, and Williams Alex is now directly behind him as well. As is VSR Flying Finn going to be looking to overtake Oli D again? No, not quite, and he has to sit behind that Mercedes once again.
Yeah, well, Oli D is a moving Mercedes roadblock. It's really compromising Flying Finn and Lucas. You know, their chances of getting on the podium are fading by the lap. They've got to try and get past Oli D, because Oli D in the recent laps has been about half a second slower than the three drivers who are in their net 1, 2, 3 positions.
Yeah, Oli D's pace not quite been what we would have expected it to be, so he's falling off slightly from the rest of the leaders, as that gap between Michael and Flores is now 1.4 seconds, which is much higher than it was previously. But VSR Flying Finn could well be having a look here. No, he's not, and again he has to sit behind Oli D, and this must be so frustrating for the Toro Rosso. He clearly has a lot of pace to use, but just can't find any way to use it, and he's still sat behind that Mercedes. Flying Finn, we do believe, has a 3-second time penalty, and he's one of, I think, the only drivers in the lead battle, the lead group, to have a penalty, so that could certainly cost him later on in this race.
Yes, well, it's not that many penalties so far, so good job everyone so far. Alex trying to get past the Renault, who's getting all out of shape in sector 3, but to be fair to the Renault, great exit, but with the DRS, Alex may have a chance for a move into turn 1. He's going to go for it.
Down the inside is to tell when he's so late on the brakes, only just manages to get it stopped, taking a few liberties with the track limits on the exit, but manages to work his way up into P9 and certainly keeps himself in contention for a potential podium, maybe even race victory later on in this race. But let's go back on board with VSR Flying Finn. No, not had the best exit through turn 5, so won't be able to challenge down Raffles Boulevard and into turn 7 as Curly picks up a 3-second time penalty. He's not far off this group as well as Ollie D goes defensive into turn 7. Flying Finn, though, can't find any way through again, and he's still sat behind that Mercedes. Ollie D, despite not having a huge amount of pace in this race, is doing an impeccable job of managing to keep Flying Finn and Lucas behind him.
They may need kink to separate these guys, and they're rapidly coming up to him. It's been a great battle up front between Jim, Roy and Jarno, but Roy's finally overtaking Jarno, so he's taken the lead of the race on track. So the top 3 covered by just over a second.
I'm sorry, I managed to miss all of that. Both the Red Bulls and the Force India going, well, at each other really for what is the lead of this race, and they are actually fairly far ahead of everybody else, so they may well be a factor later on in this race. As let's go on board with VSR Flying Finn, who's moved ahead of Ollie D, who I assume has made some kind of mistake there because he's lost both positions to both Lucas and Flying Finn out of nowhere. I didn't expect that one at all, and despite defending so well for so many laps, he's lost 2 positions in a matter of corners really, so something horribly has gone wrong there for Ollie D.
It was a brilliant move by Flying Finn into the hairpin, which got him the place, and then because Ollie D was sort of having to give him the space, it allowed, I'm calling him Epic Gamer still, get alongside him into the end of Sector 2. So yeah, Ollie D, I think, to be fair, I think he will be the first to admit he's not quite in the races today.
No, not quite. We've seen him have plenty of pace at various other points this season and in previous seasons as well, but today he hasn't quite been a match for VSR Flying Finn, those 2 McLarens or Lucas really. And imagine Lucas now is definitely going to be a man on the move. He must be so frustrated having been sat behind both of those guys for so long. He's been in traffic this entire race. He will be desperate to get a move on here. Is he going to look down the inside of Flying Finn into turn 7? No, he's not, because Finn is very late on the brakes. Can he make the corner from that late? Yes, he can, just about. Is Lucas going to look down the inside, though? Yes, he is, and Flying Finn's gone very, very wide, and they will be side by side as they go into the next left, but Flying Finn just about manages to maintain that one, and you can tell Lucas is a frustrated man, having been sat behind other cars all race. He is desperate to get that move done.
Yes, well, perhaps he'll go for the move that Finn did on Ollie D the previous lap. Not sure he's close enough to do it here. I think, yeah, he'll cover it off. They're now closing in on Kink, the Renault in front. So one of the interesting dynamics is actually because the Red Bulls are so close, who's going to get first pick on the pit stop? You'd imagine it will be Roy, I guess, because they can't pit at the same time.
Yeah, you would imagine that Roy would choose the optimal lap to pit on, as he is the lead Red Bull both in this race and in the championship as well. Although Tim, we've seen him, he won in Austria, so he's a very talented driver himself. He's had a number of incredible drives from well outside the top 10 and getting himself some decent points and podiums on a number of occasions as well. So he's certainly not to be discounted as we go later on into this race, as VGI Lucas is putting Flying Finn under all kinds of pressure but just can't find any way through at the moment. He's sliding quite a lot, so I wonder if he's having trouble with his tyre temperatures as well, because that certainly doesn't look like a car that's behaving particularly nicely.
Well, I think one of the problems they've had to drive in dirty air so much of this race. You know, there's been hardly any clean air except when they've made their first pit stops because the field was so close together. But there's so many close battles on track. Don't know where to look. They're now closing in on Kink's Renault. So I think Lucas has got to see if Finn gets distracted by the Renault to make a move. If he can get past both of them, if he can get clean air, I think Epic will be one of the quickest drivers on track.
And you have to remember, this is a man who knows how to overtake. He went around the outside at Eau Rouge, which is not something many drivers can do. So even if there might not seem to be that many orthodox overtaking opportunities around this track, if there's anywhere to overtake, I'm sure he will find it, as Flying Finn gets all out of shape there. Not like a natural line to take at all, so he's definitely struggling a little bit, as well as Lucas taking a very wide line, as Leclerc has retired from this session. So let's see, are we going to get a safety car here, which was certainly playing to the hands of both of those Red Bulls and the Force India as well. And I don't think we are. We've waited a little bit too long now for us to have a potential safety car. So it seems we're going to be going to the end of this race without anything else interrupting, as Lucas picks up a 3-second time penalty and then drives into the wall to compile his errors. And that is probably not the best sequence of corners that Lucas was expecting at all. He's sliding all over the place as well, and well, that could cost him dearly, particularly if he's got damage.
I think he just got away without damage. The end plate's look intact, but it's not going to help his cause at all. And now these two are stuck behind Kink's Renault, and look how far behind they are. They're nearly 5 seconds behind Alex. So Alex working his way through the field as has really put him in position for a podium, although they've got to defend against the fast-moving soft runners later on when they pit for the faster compound. So I feel like they're all going to come together at some point. Those on the whack of the wall.
Finn massively in the wall there. But he could well be having a look at overtaking into turn 7, though this could be crucial for his race. He needs to get past now, and it looks like he has finally done that. And he now has a car between himself and VGI Lucas, who dives down the inside into the hairpin. What a move that would have been. He's so aggressive every single time he goes for an overtake. Overtaking now in that road is going very wide. He's all over the shop at this point in the race. And I think Lucas now is going to be able to get through. He has lost a significant amount of time to Flying Finn, though, and that might well cost him as Ollie D works his way past that Renault as well. And in fairness to Ollie D, he's doing well to stick on the back of these guys, and he's following them reasonably nicely in the DRS as well. So the race not over for Ollie D yet either, as the two McLarens are now closing in on some more traffic as well. So Michael's now back within a second of his teammate.
Yes, well, Big C, probably a tougher customer to get past, but he's on very old tyres. I still think they won't be pitting for a few more laps, probably at least lap 19 to 21. I think that's when they'll be pitting for the ultra softs, I would have thought. So this could be another chance for Michael. He's very close to the back of his teammate to go through the final corner.
Flores will be cursing his luck, sat behind that Toro Rosso, just losing so much time. He's got to try and get through into turn 1. Is he going to look for a move down the inside? No, he's not. But now his teammate is closer to the back of him than he is to the back of Big C. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Michael going for a move into turn 7. Flores has really got to get a move on here if he doesn't want to be overtaken by his teammate. He has to get past Big C now, otherwise he is done for. He's in the slipstream of that Toro Rosso, who's really struggling on his tyres at this point. 18 laps into this race, and he is yet to pit. Flores, though, looking to the outside. There's not a lot of space there. Is Michael going to try and get involved as well? No, not for now, as Flores swoops around the outside of Big C at turn 7, taking, again, a few liberties on the outside with the track limits, and Michael follows him through, diving down the inside at the next corner as well. So both those McLarens make quick work of Big C, and they are still nose to tail at this point in the race.
Yes, well, this has worked out very nicely for Michael. It's put Flores under all sorts of pressure. No more. I don't think they'll get to car Alex before he pits for the faster compounds. But Alex is still there, and let's also talk about Curly Worley. He's got far less laps on those softs, so he could still be a factor for the podium come the end.
But the problem for Curly is he has to try and overtake those cars on track, which is certainly easier said than done. And he may well have a few issues as we go on later on into this race, as well as, whilst those two McLarens were fighting out with Big C, Williams Alex has managed to join the party as well, and he's not far behind those two at all. I believe that gap is just over a second probably between Alex and those two McLarens. We mentioned at the start of the broadcast, if Alex wants to have any chance of fighting for this title, as Roy pits from the lead of this race, and now this is crucial to see where he comes out and whether he's going to be in any contention whatsoever for the victory in this race. He's the first of the two Red Bulls to pit, and where is he going to come out on those ultra soft tyres? Alex and Nadia followed him in as well, so lap 20 of 31 is clearly the ideal lap time, the ideal lap to pit for the ultra soft tyres. And where is Roy going to be? Is he going to be ahead of Curly? That is going to be the big question here. And yes, he is. Just so, Roy has certainly got a chance of at least a podium in this race.
Yes, definitely. But there's not much gap, is there? I mean, it's like, around 8-9 seconds between Flores and Roy. So he is in contention to win this race if he can get some overtakes done.
And those ultra softs are going to be miles faster than the soft compound tyres. These guys have had their tyres on for what? 14 laps, 15 laps minimum, and he's going to be on fresh ultra soft. So if he can keep those tyre temperatures in check, he's certainly going to be a factor later on in this race. And we thought all along that this race was going to be decided in a battle between the two McLarens, but if he can move past those other soft runners quickly, he has certainly got a chance as we go into the latter stages of this race. Oh, it is all hotting up now.
Yeah, and Tim will be pitting for the ultras, and Jana as well. 3 very quick drivers who are going to be hunting down these soft runners who are going to be doing well over 20 laps by the end of the race. So, I think they could be on the right strategy. They've had superb opening stints, but track position is king here, so they've still got to get the job done. Ollie D trying to hold up Roy at the moment,
and he is doing a very good job at that as well, forcing Roy offline at every opportunity. But Roy just has so much more grip. It's a joy to watch, really, just pushing the absolute limits on these fresh ultra soft compound tyres. He's got to make the most of these tyres. He's doing the undercut on everybody else he was racing with, so if he can get past Ollie D here, he could well be in with a fighting chance of picking up a podium here. He has the DRS, he has the slipstream, and Ollie D, if he's wise, is not going to fight this at all. So down the inside to turn 1 goes Deagle Killer and makes the move stick very, very easily. But let's go back to those two McLarens, actually, who are incredibly close together. But again, I don't think Michael is quite close enough. So again, he has to sit behind his teammate, as Jarno as well is ahead of Curly.
Yes, but Nardi has undercut both Jarno and Tim, so he's effectively the second place in terms of the Ultrasoft runners, so that's worked out brilliantly for Nardi, pitting that one extra lap early.
And he's not far behind Roy at all, so again, like that Red Bull, he could certainly be a factor in challenging for a podium, maybe even more as we go later on into this race. We've still got 10 laps remaining, and Roy is by far and away the fastest car on the track. Just look at the way he's eating into that gap to everybody else, and surely there's absolutely nothing that these soft runners have to defend with, really. Their tyres just aren't going to offer anywhere near enough grip to battle anybody who's on fresh, ultra-soft compound tyres.
No, not at all. I think this Red Bull, this is the driver to watch at the moment. Nardi as well, Jarno, Tim. I mean, those four could end up being the top four at the end of the race, because there's not a lot of lap time, and these Ultrasofts in clean air are probably at least 2 seconds a lap faster than these old softs.
Let's see, though, how quickly Roy can get past Lucas. This should probably set a precedent for the rest of the race as to how much easier it's going to be for him to overtake everybody else. He's closed that gap from over a second to now 2/10 within, what, a lap, half a lap. It's just insane the speed that he has at this point. Through the final 2 corners, can he stay close enough to go from moving to turn 1? He might well be close enough, running in the highest ERS mode available, and he sets the fastest lap of this race. Down the inside into turn 1 he goes, and he moves himself up into P6. He is flying at this point in the race, as is Nardi, who moves past Ollie D as well. So both of these guys are putting in a shift at this point in the race.
Oh, absolutely, and yet Nardi getting past Ollie D with constant ease, so much more confidence, so much more grip through the final corner. That's allowing them to make these DRS moves on the straight, which previously during the race looked so difficult to pull off. Easy as you like.
And these two McLarens are currently out at the front, blissfully unaware that their 1-2 is about to be challenged by some flying Red Bulls and a Williams, who are on much fresher tyres and could well be right on the back of them well before we even get anywhere near the end of this race, as Roy is closing in on Flying Finn as well. That gap again is down to under a second. He is flying at this point, and he's catching Flying Finn at a rate of knots, who's also closing in on Big C, who is yet to pit in this race, I believe.
Yep.
He's yet to pit in this race. So Big C going very, very late and potentially looking for Hypersofts, although that seems a little bit of an odd decision, as the Hypers are, well, not a good race tyre at all.
Yes, well, he'd have to go pretty much to lap 26 at the very least minimum, as Lucas has already been overtaken by his fellow VGIA driver, Nardi. And Lucas has actually dropped, Jarno get through as well. So those who started on the Hypersofts, they're really paying the price now.
They certainly are, and their tyres just have nothing to offer them at this stage of the race. I think Roy is certainly going to be pretty close to getting past Flying Finn here, as Big C finally, at long last, comes into the pits on lap 23 of 31. But Roy is so close to the back of Flying Finn, and it should be an easy move into turn 1 as Nardi sets the fastest lap in this race. He's certainly one that you cannot discount at this point either. So Roy, in that Red Bull, having started in 15th place in this race, is now up in P4 and has his sights well and truly set on at least a podium here, maybe even more.
Yep, absolutely. As Tim's trying to get past Lucas. Lucas trying to, a fair whack into the wall for the Haas. They've got damage there. But Ebic's probably got not a prayer of defending this, but he's going to try anyway.
Yeah, Lucas's race has not gone well at all. He qualified up in P3, had a 5-place grid penalty, which dropped him down into P8. He dropped a position to P9 off the start, and his race has just gone from bad to worse. He's done absolutely everything in his power to try and make it work, but it just hasn't gone to plan for him whatsoever, and he now finds himself at the tail end of the points, potentially losing even more positions between now and the end of this race, as, well, Roy is closing that gap rapidly. Again, it was, 2.7 seconds now between him and Alex. Let's look at the gap to the leader, though. So he's 5.5 seconds behind those two McLarens at the moment, but that gap is coming down rapidly, probably by about 1.5 seconds per lap, maybe even more in clear air, whilst those Ultrasofts are still in their decent operating window and aren't too worn. So I think he will probably be on the back of those two McLarens by the end of this race, maybe even quicker if those two start battling, but we'll have to wait and see. It's all up in the air at the moment. Anything could happen.
Well, he's wait, who's that ahead of him? Is that, yeah, that's Alex already.
Wow. He's already in camera view of Alex as he sets the
There
fastest
it
lap
is.
of this race.
Clean air, and that was 2 seconds faster than the race leader.
A 37.0. He is the fastest man on track by a mile. He is closing on these guys at a ridiculous rate. But while all of that is going on, Michael might well have a chance to try and get past Flores for what is at the moment the lead of this race. Might not stay that way for very long. These two McLarens have been out front on their own the entire race for all 24 of these 31 laps. But at the moment, it looks like they are under a huge threat from the Red Bull behind, who's closed that gap from 5.5 seconds to 3.9 in a sector. He is by far and away the fastest car on track, and I think could end up winning this race. And what a drive that would be.
Yeah, it was a 1:39.711 for Flores the previous lap, a 37 flat for Jim Roy. So that just shows you the pace difference. And I don't know, if these two teammates are close, could be a decision may have to be made at some point in terms of the championship, because if they do have a close relationship as teammates, it's got to make logical sense to do the swap now before Roy gets on both of them, because Alex is not going to have a prayer of defending this position.
And that gap between Alex and Roy is closed down to 3.4, and Roy's closed that gap at this point in the lap by 2 seconds. 2 seconds on the race leaders. The fastest guys the entire race have just had their lead eaten away in the last 5 laps or so, and Roy has worked his strategy at the moment to perfection, and he is overtaking cars like they're not even there. If he can get a decent exit out of these final 2 corners, he might well have a chance at getting past Alex pretty swiftly here. Alex, if he's intelligent about this, is not going to fight it at all, really. Is he going to be close to look down the inside into turn 1? No, not quite. So he's going to have to wait and sit behind and potentially look into turn 7, as whilst these two are scrapping away as well, those two McLarens are getting closer and closer, and Michael exerting all kinds of pressure on Flores. But I think there could be 2 moves going on here, one for the race lead and one for P3. Williams Jim Roy, formerly known as Deagle Killer, currently sat in P2 in this championship, is breezing past Williams Alex for P3. He started down in P15. He is working his way through the field incredibly quickly and has now worked his way up almost to the 2 race leaders. This is going to be some finish. We have 6 laps remaining, and he is definitely going to be on the back of those 2 McLarens before long.
Oh, this is hotting up. And don't forget, there's a quartet of Ultrasoft runners in the top 7 currently. Online Racing Ltd and Jim, they have similar pace to Roy. Not quite as fast as that, because they haven't really had clean air yet. But, you know, Alex is going to be absolutely swamped by those 3 behind him in the next lap or so, I believe. So now it's going to be interesting to see how quickly Michael trying to get close to Flores, but he knows now Roy's right there on a tyre that's 2 steps softer. He's got a lot to think about in probably about a lap's time.
And Roy, up until this point in the race, has gained 12 positions from his starting position. He has worked this race to absolute perfection. It is a masterclass in how to race from outside the top 10. We said he had a poor qualifying. I think that was all planned. I don't think he ever intended to be inside the top 10, and he has just made his strategy work to perfection, really. And even though the 2 leaders haven't really been battling each other much at all, if at all, this entire race, it still hasn't meant they have even a prayer, really, of staying ahead as we start lap 26 of 31 here. And, well, the race victory is certainly up for grabs as Michael picks up a 3-second time penalty. Oh, dear. It goes from bad to worse for the McLaren, and we mentioned that not picking up penalties is one of his strengths. Well, it's all gone out the window now.
Yes, well, both McLarens have a penalty now, I believe. So I believe that's a bit of panic from Michael when he saw, you know, Roy closing in. He's trying to get past his teammate, but I think he's left it too late. Alex being overtaken by Jarno for P4, and I think, you know, Alex, Flores and Michael, they dominated this race, but I believe the way it's going, none of them are going to be on the podium at this rate.
Yeah, and just the way the strategies have worked out and the race as a whole has worked out, they just haven't had a prayer, really, at being able to compete with these Ultrasoft runners. That gap between Flores and Roy is now 1.5 seconds. So all Roy has to do between now and the end of this race is just keep it clean, and the victory is within his grasp.
But this is a different dynamic for Roy this time. He's been able to overtake cars who had no one in front of them to defend with DRS, but now he's got 2 cars. You know, Michael's had DRS the whole time, so this is going to be a bit trickier for Roy. So it's going to be all about, has he kept enough traction in those ultras? He's pushed extremely hard into this final stint. So now traction out the final, something Michael has actually struggled with throughout the race. In fact, that's why he's not been able to overtake Flores on the main straight, or indeed the second DRS straight.
This could be the defining moment of not only this race, but the championship as a whole. As we start lap 27 of 31, the two McLarens are fighting it out for the lead, but Williams Jim Roy, currently sat in P2 in this championship, is about to overtake the championship leader, and this could be crucial. He could cut that gap to as little as 10 points. Going into the remaining races of the season, he is so close to the back of Michael's car, and through turn 5, if he can get a decent exit here, he could have a decent chance. Down Raffles Boulevard and into turn 7 we go. Michael slightly in the wall. He does have DRS from his teammate, but is it going to be enough to defend? Roy, is he going to look to the inside at turn 7? Is he going to go for a dive on the championship leader? No, he's not. Michael goes defensive, but he's so late on the brakes. Somehow he manages to make the corner, but Roy has a much better run, and he somehow avoids managing to crash there as they both went for the inside. That was never going to work, and Michael manages to maintain the position for now. He is clinging on for dear life. He is under all kinds of pressure, and that's allowing Flores to get away. Roy looking down the inside. That is not an overtaking opportunity, and again Michael manages to stay ahead. Roy has just got to keep his cool here, do not risk throwing away the race at this late stage. He's got so much more pace than both of these McLarens. He does not need to take any risks whatsoever. He just needs to be careful here.
Yeah, no, I think, to be honest, Roy's toying with him. To be honest, he's putting the car, he's forcing Michael to go ultra defensive, and it's just taking more and more life out of his tyres, and I think Roy is just biding his time. And look, the reason he's done that is so that Michael drops out of DRS range of his team. It makes it easier for him to overtake him on the next lap. So that is brilliant tactical racing from Roy there.
Michael is going to be incredibly vulnerable as we start the next lap of this race. Don't forget, you can now vote for your driver of the day. I think I know who I'd be voting for, and imagine all of you do too. So make sure you go and vote for your driver of the day. There is a link in the chat. But keep your eyes glued to the screen. We start lap 28 of 31. Williams Jim Roy is closing rapidly onto the back of Michael. He can't go for a move into turn 1, so you have to sit behind and wait to look for a move into turn 7. But this is all playing into the hands of Flores. He's yet to win a race so far this season, as Michael gets incredibly out of shape on the edges of turn 3 and into turn 5. Can he get a decent run out of here? He needs good traction to have a prayer of defending, but he's not going to have a chance. Williams Jim Roy moving to the inside into turn 7. He has so much overspeed, and there is nothing that Michael can do about it, and he moves down a position into P3. Roy up into P2, and now he has the race lead in his sights.
Yep. Well, it's given Flores half a chance, 1.4 seconds ahead. It might have taken a lot of tyre life out of Jim Roy's Ultras there, but still going to have relative fresh tyres compared to those on the softs who've done well over 20 laps now on those softs. So it is still boxy for Jim Roy, and don't forget, Flores has a penalty as well, I believe. I just checked a few laps ago. So as long as Roy gets no penalties himself, he's on 2 warnings though, so he can't afford any other mistakes.
And something else to note as well is Jarno is directly behind Michael as well, so that McLaren could be under threat from losing another position as well. He just needs to be very careful here that he doesn't get too frustrated with his position and start taking unnecessary risks. He needs to remember that whatever happens here, as long as he keeps it clean between now and the end of this race, he will still have the championship lead going into the next round of this season, which I think at this point is imperative. He cannot afford to make any stupid mistakes and lose points that he should have gained, as Jarno is so close to the back of his car. He just needs to make sure he doesn't have any contact with him, and then he should be alright to gain a decent points haul anyway from this race, despite losing points to Roy.
Yes, absolutely. It's definitely damage imitation now. Nardi's got ahead of Alex as well, and I think Tim's about to get past Alex as well. So yeah, Michael, you know, if he can finish on the podium at least, that would be an amazing result at this point. But I think he's not going to have a chance really of defending against Jarno, who, you know, we can't forget, won the French Grand Prix this season.
And Jarno is incredibly close to the back of his car, as is Roy actually to the back of Flores. Can he go for a move? No, not quite. He has to sit behind for now, but Jarno will go down the inside into turn 7, and he moves past Michael easily. So Jarno up into a podium position, and if Roy makes a mess of overtaking Flores, Jarno could well be in with a shout of winning this race. He seems to have just as good a pace as the Red Bull does, and if he can nail these next few laps while Roy is sat behind Flores, I think he has a chance. Yeah,
no, Jarno definitely has a chance of winning this race still. He's got to try and get onto the back of the Red Bull before the end of this lap, because I think Roy's going to find it difficult to get past Flores before we get to those DRS zones again. So Jarno's got to push like mad now.
Roy, though, is incredibly close to the back of that McLaren. Is there anything he can do? No, not quite. So he will be sat behind through this entire final sector, and Jarno has got to push like mad. He's got to use this opportunity to get right onto the back of those two cars before Roy is able to overtake Flores and disappear down the road. Flores has absolutely nothing to defend with. His tyres are going to offer him nowhere near enough grip. He's not going to have DRS, he's not going to have slipstream, he's going to be a sitting duck on the straight. Jarno has to nail these next few corners if he wants to have a chance of winning this race.
Yes, I don't think he's close enough though, because I think this is going to be the moment for Roy. Maybe not here, because Flores has been really good on the traction in this final corner the entire race. So I don't think it's going to happen here. So it's going to be all down the Raffles Boulevard. But Flores, as I say, he's had good traction out of these corners the entire race. That's how he's been in this position since everyone had these pit stops.
Roy, though, this is his chance. We are on the penultimate lap of this Grand Prix. Surely this is the opportunity for him to take the lead. He started way down in P15. He has worked his way through the field spectacularly with an unbelievable strategy. And now he has a chance to take the lead of this race, moving to the inside down Raffles Boulevard.
Oh.
Flores squeezes him aggressively towards the wall, but down the inside into turn 7 he goes. Flores is putting up one hell of a fight, though. Is not going to let him go easily. He dives back down the inside. It's the hairpin as well. And he's so close to the wall. And they make contact. And surely Flores has got to concede the position now. He's doing everything he can to try and fight, as Jarno might well have a chance here as well. And I think Roy at long last has got past. It's 3 wide into the next left-hander. Roy at long last takes the lead of this race, and Flores just about hangs on to P2 ahead of Jarno. That was incredible to see. Jarno's got to get a move on now. He has to get past Flores, and then he might well have a chance at trying to challenge Roy towards the end of this race. He's got to get past Flores here, though. This is crucial. If he can get down the inside of Flores into this next corner, he might well have a chance. Down the inside he goes. There's huge contact into the braking zone. They are still side by side. Jarno barges his way through up into P2, and he might well now have a chance of winning this race as Flores comes back at him. That is crazy, crazy driving from the McLaren driver. He'd kept it clean so much up until this point in the race, and he's just turned into complete madness as Jarno's in the wall. The Force India's lost his front wing. Lucas has retired from the session as well. The two McLarens are going side by side. McLaren and Flores. McLaren is turned complete turmoil here. Jarno's got a 5-second stop and go penalty. It's all kicking off on the final lap of this Singapore Grand Prix. The McLarens are attacking each other. Nardi's trying to get involved as well, and Jarno definitely has front wing damage, and all of that, they're going side by side again. There's contact between the two McLarens. Flores is off the circuit. Michael's just behind him again, and it's all kicking off here. The McLarens cannot help each other at all. They are destroying each other's races. Flores just needs to calm down a little bit. He's turned completely crazy in the last few laps, dive-bombing people left, right and centre, and he's now destroying his teammates' championship bid as it's almost 3 wide down Raffles Boulevard again. Into turn 7 they go, and Michael is trying to get down the inside, and he's not made it work again. Another Williams might be going for a double overtake on all 3 of them. There's more contact between all of them, and this has turned very messy very quickly. There's a bit of revenge going on here. I think Flores, though, is still ahead of his McLaren teammate. There's front wing littering the track everywhere. Is Nardi going to look down the inside of both of them? Not quite. And how this hasn't ended up in a massive crash, I have no idea.
Well, you can finally breathe, my friend. It's gone a bit Prost and Senna there from the 80s between the two McLaren drivers. It's got absolutely ridiculous stuff from the McLaren drivers. They've destroyed each other's races. They would have been on for a decent result regardless, but they may not end up with anything in the way they're going as Roy heads for the checkered flag.
So, what a race this has been. We've seen amazing race after amazing race this season, and this one has been one of the best once again. This has just been unbelievable to watch. The way this race has unfolded has been like nothing I've ever seen before. So, Williams Jim Roy, currently sat P2 in the championship, is going to be gaining points back on his championship rival, Michael, who is down in P5 at the moment. So, Roy will win the Singapore Grand Prix from 15th on the grid. That is unheard of, as Jarno will cross the line in P2 but drop down because of that stop and go penalty. So in all of that, it's a Red Bull 1-2 from P15 and 16 on the grid. That is just insane.
Wow, Red Bull, what an incredible result. Incredible result. And Michael finished off the podium in the end. So Flores, I think that's his first podium of the season. No, his second podium of the season. He got one up at Spain. But, wow, there'll be a bit of talking between the McLaren teammates after that. That is for sure. But, you know, Red Bull, an absolutely magnificent showing from both of them, but Roy in particular.
Wow, what a race. That is, I say this seemingly after every single race we have in this league, but that is one of the best races I have ever seen in my life. I imagine the stewards will probably have a thing or two to say about the crazy events that unfolded in those last few laps. There's just front wing littering the entire track. Flores just turned into a complete madman. He was driving so calmly, so well the entire race, and in the last 2 laps just seemed to completely lose his head. That was completely bizarre, but typical Flores in a weird sort of way.
Yes, it is typical, but that has closed the championship still further. The Eagles now on 200 points, and I think it's 12 points for 4th place for Michael. So that will be 205. So that's
Wow.
5 points. I think the gap's now 5 points in the championship with 6 to go.
Wow.
If my maths is right. Don't quote me on that. My maths isn't great, but I think that's what it is.
Well, whatever the maths is, it's certainly very close. I can tell you that for sure. So make sure you definitely tune in next week. Do not go anywhere because this title fight is going down to the wire. But there are confirmation of your results. Then I imagine this is still subject to change with various penalties getting removed and the stewards maybe having a thing or two to say about the events of those final few laps. But in the end, somehow it was a Red Bull 1-2 with Roy and Tim ahead of Floris in P3. And the two McLarens who looked set for a 1-2 for so long in that race ended up down in P3 and P4 and having a bit of a civil war towards the end of that one. With Williams Alex in P5 with a solid but quiet drive, doing well to keep his head in all of that madness. With Jarno down in P6 after that penalty, I imagine that might get removed though, depending on what it was for. With VSR Flying Finn in P7 ahead of Nardi in P8, Veloce Oli D down in P9 and Curly Whirly picking up a solid point in P10 ahead of Clarkey, Alex, Big C, RC Alonso, Jay Thorne, Tiras Nitzel, Ovidi Kink and VGI Lucas, who had a bit of a nightmare really, and that might well spell the end of his championship bid, unfortunately.
Yes, well, you know, the last two races at Monza, you know, he was in the fight for lead at Monza. He then went into the back of Deagle Killer, and that spelled the end of his challenge at Monza. And then he retires here, no points. So yeah, the freeway title fight could well just become a two-way fight between Michael and Jim Roy.
Anyway, that is going to bring our coverage of this incredible Singapore Grand Prix to an end. Do make sure you go and check out the PC and Xbox races, which are still to come this evening. Make sure you subscribe to the channel to make sure you follow this race or this season as it heads into its final few races and keep on track with the title fight. You can also vote for your driver of the day, which I believe is still open if you click the link in the comments. But that is going to do it from us. Thank you all very much for watching, and we will see you again next week. Goodbye.